Okay, so this is going to be my Affliction feedback video as of October 23rd, 2025. The most recent build, which was the 22nd of October, was sort of more of a general class tree, which I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about the Affliction tree. So, starting off, I'm just really just going to give my top feedback points for the tree and just kind of go through them. So top feedback points. Filler spell. I think Nightfall should let you move while channeling Drain Soul slash Malefic Grasp and while moving. And on top of that, I think we should just get rid of Improved Shadow Bolt and just make Drain Soul the main filler spell for Affliction. Um, this is more of a personal preference thing, but I think it would help, not really help, but like thematically, it would give all three specs their own filler spell. Demonology could still be Shadow Bolt. Destruction has Incinerate, and Affliction would just have Drain Soul. Then also, I think that Grasp down here should either become its own button, or just have a more visual cue on when it replaces Drain Soul in my instance, or Shadow Bolt as it is on the alpha tree. I don't have access to alpha, so I'm just using the Bowhead talent tree calculator instead. And then some pathing nodes. I think some nodes should be moved around to help with the tree flowing a little bit better. The biggest thing I have really is Seeds of Destruction floating into Sacrilash. For Hellcaller at least, it'll feel really bad having to take a Seed of Corruption button just to get access to Sacrilash, which buffs wither damage. Like having to take 2 points, essentially waste 2 points into an AoE node just to get to Sacrilash feels very, very bad. The similarly saying the 2-point nodes that lead into the capstones, I feel should just be brought down to 1 point. These feel kind of like they're gimp nodes into, like, you're paying the toll into these nodes to get further down into the tree, which I feel like I thought we had moved away from in War Within, but I see they've reverted back to this for Midnight, which I think is a step back in the right direction in terms of, what nodes should be. Again, I don't have access to alpha, but unless Unstable Affliction can carry the single target damage profile by itself, the tree is giving sort of Dragonflight vibes, where you had to pick either all single target or all AoE in terms of how you built your tree out, and it feels problematic and unnecessary at this point. I feel like Sudden Onset and Shared Agony could maybe swap places. Sudden Onset is more universally applicable, which I feel like should be in this kind of top node of all of the spec tree. And then Shared Agony is more of an AoE, or it has single target applicability, but it's definitely more of like an AoE council cleave ability. So I feel like maybe these two could swap places, but also you're probably taking both of them for the agony damage regardless, so that probably doesn't matter. A little bit more on the feedback for this. So just kind of half building a tree here. So you were at 7 nodes, 7 points, if we were to take just everything up here, because 2% mastery is probably going to be really good, 2% haste is really nice. We're at 7 points out of the 34. And you have to spend them into one of these 3 to continue down the tree. Now, it feels really bad, like even just not taking Practice Pestilence. Okay. 2 points to get further down into the tree. Cool. Take Drain Soul, take AC. And then it does flow into the rest of this. But it feels really bad having to skip out on essentially a 3% aura buff. And then you go into the rest of the tree. This feels really bad, as sometimes it can lead to awkward talent point builds towards the end. Like, just for example, I'll just build a hypothetical Hellcaller or Soul Harvester build, like full single target. Go this. Okay. So you do all those, and then you're, for Soul Harvester at least, and you can get to your kind of capstone areas. That's fine. But like, if you were to go, for a Hellcaller build, you're 22 points in. Which, again, this is just a weird pathing choice, but like, for a Hellcaller single target tree, you're 22 points in. You want to spend, okay, you have, what is that, eight more points? So, theoretically, for Hellcaller, you could just do this, and then just throw the last point at Improved Haunt, sure. But if you do this, or even if you take out the point of Nocturnal Yield and just put it into those two, you can't get access to Clawing Power, which is just a 4% aura buff everywhere you go, which feels really bad because you have to pay the 2 points into Fatal Echoes to get into Clawing Power. Similarly, just for an AoE build, like, this is just an example build, like, you have to pay the 2 points into Relinquished to get into the rest of these, which just feels really bad, and there's like no, like, arguably you could take out Xavius' Gambit for an AoE build, but then you're missing out on the stat count of Agony and the Agony damage, and then, just for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, like, now you could in theory take, the 3 capstones, but then you're missing out on the UA damage, the sudden onset. Like, for an AoE build, like, this is probably fine, but like, depending on if you're running Hellcaller or Soul Harvester, it feels really bad not being able to take Sacrilash and maybe Nocturnal Yield for Hellcaller, because that's a 25%, I think. It's a 10%, 15% here and a 10% damage amp to Wither, which is, like, I'd argue that's pretty big. But just because these two cost 2 points, and then you have to waste another point up here to get to everything else that you want down here, it just feels really bad and really awkward. So something needs to be changed about either Summoners Embrace this placement, or just how the tree flows up top. Later on, I'll kind of bring up a custom tree I made that kind of helps with this problem, but that's for later on. Overall talent node notes. Ravenous Afflictions could probably just be a 1.5 or a 2 ppm for your crits to give you Nightfall. The 1.2, I don't know how impactful this is on retail. I'd have to check logs, but like, this is it. The 1.2 is just kind of whatever. Single target, it is kind of nice, but like in AoE, it's negligible. Improved Haunt, I think, honestly, Improved Haunt, they could keep the damage modifier, or like lower it, and then just make it instant cast. Like, having the cast time on it is kind of archaic, and it would kind of be nice for like that mop era. You just push Haunt, it's instant cast. And like, the damage on it, I don't have access to alpha, but like, if it's, even with the Shadow of Nathraza and all that stuff, like all this stuff, it has to be, Haunt has to be doing like 5 to 10% of your overall single target, to kind of, I feel, be worth. But then again, I could be wrong with like when sims are a thing, but That's that. Fatal Echoes, I feel like could just be 7.5 to 15% proc rate. Um, but again, it entirely depends on Unstable Affliction's tuning itself. For maybe 4 and 8% is perfectly okay with how much UA does in terms of overall, but like without damage meters and like logs and stuff working really on alpha that I can have access to, it entirely just depends on Unstable Affliction tuning. Cloying Power probably needs to be capped to 4 or 5 targets max, 16/20% damage amp. Because it's really awkward. It introduces a really awkward playstyle in that you have to, in theory, you want to throw Unstable Affliction on everything and have like, you know, throwing out an eight mobs in a pack if you have the haste or hero, what have you. 32% damage amp, but you're just pushing UA on separate mobs, and that I know it just introduces a weird clunky kind of play style of like you should want to dot as many things with Unstable Affliction in like a Mythic Plus pack, but then you're also not using Seed. I mean, it's kind of fixed with Nocturnal Yield and Nightfall, but like even still, like it's just, I feel like this should have a cap on it to kind of prevent that like awkward playstyle from like being a thing. Because I would hate for it to be like optimal to like, oh yeah, you put UA on 5 things and then you like 5-6 things and then you start spamming Seed. Like it just doesn't feel right. Next it's really just hero talent nodes. Soul Harvester should probably add a clause to work with Seed of Corruption as well as Unstable Affliction with the Demonic Soul. As currently it only works with Unstable Affliction, and it has no real AoE applications, I guess. My guess is this is probably just an oversight since Rapture used to be the primary single target and AoE spender. But yeah, just having like Corruption added to this would probably help with the AoE in the long run. That's pretty much it on that end. I have like one more note here where I'm just more. This is me being more cautious about something to. So there's a lot of nodes that mention or modify critical strikes in a lot of the spec trees. Like you have Contagion here, in Hellcaller. Yeah, 10% crit damage. Yeah, more critical strike from Zalins and Zalins for us at Cruelty and Cut. Like it feels like a lot of the specs are being pushed towards crit where historically they haven't been, and that just feels very awkward because I'm used to Warlock being kind of like a haste crit with Destro, but like haste mastery with Af and Demo. But like with all these crit modifiers that have been getting added in, even with if I go Demonology, like 6% crit damage, your primary demon gets more crit based on how much crit you have. Like it just feels very weird that they're pushing crit on a lot of classes that haven't historically built it. I don't know if this is just to introduce gameplay variety or what have you, but it still just feels weird that they're pushing crit sort of subtly. That I don't. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm crazy and haven't. And like I'm the only one kind of noticing this, and it's a me issue. But this is just something I wanted to bring up. So this is the class tree that I made. These are just the notes on the side. Just sort of as I've been building it. As you can see, it's pretty much the same as it is on the retail tree, with some minor differences. It's like it still has the same pathing pretty much. Really, all the changes I've made is I've made these two 1-point nodes, and I've swapped the places with them. And I moved Relinquish from down here up to here, since I feel like it should be right here, since it's a universally applicable node. And with like Nocturnal Yield and Shard Instability, I feel like having it right here in the middle is like really nice just to have like extra Soul Shard stuff. But it's also here because it leads directly into Sacrilash and Shared Agony, which I mentioned earlier that I swapped with Sudden Onset. I feel like having Relinquished here and feed directly out of Summoner's Embrace would help deal with like the weird, like I said, like so you didn't have to go through Seeds of Destruction to get to Sacrilash for Hellcolor. Like you could just do Relinquished, boom, into Sacrilash, boom, into Contagion. You know, that's sort of why I did that. I swapped Fatal Echoes and Clawing Powers spot. I feel like you want Clawing Power everywhere, and having to spend the node into Fatal Echoes into here is maybe a bit excessive in terms of like paying the toll to get to the thing you really want. But that's more me wishful thinking than anything else. And then this node, which is where Relinquish was, I just replaced it with Doom Blossom and Soulflame. Doom Blossom was a talent in Dragonflight, where whenever Seed of Corruption deals damage to a target suffering from unstable affliction, they explode, dealing splash damage essentially. And then Soulflame, whenever you kill a target, it soul bursts into flames, dealing Shadow Flame damage to all nearby enemies. I figured these two leading into the Seed row was thematic. And then like you could have like Doom Blossom if you want like sort of prio constant splash damage, or Soul Flame if there's like, you know, a bunch of ads that spawn on a boss. You just get a bunch of funnel cleave into it. But that's really my only, these are my only really proposed changes. Is maybe something like this. It doesn't have to be Doom Blossom or Soul Flame, but like another talent here that feeds into Seeds, and then moving Relinquished up top and having it go into Sacrilash and Shared Agony, I think fixes the awkward pathing issue of these nodes, and then just making this a 1-point node and this a 1-point node, and then everything else down here. Because then, like in theory, just build a Soul Harvester single target tree, just for example. Clawing Power, and then you got 2 more points. Like you could go Fatal Echoes into Cascading Calamity or Soul Miser. For Hellcaller, boom, Sacrilash, call it good. Depending on like if I never updated the tooltip, it's fine. And then, you know, depending on like other tuning and stuff, like you could do move points around, but I don't know. That's just kind of what I've thought of for my video. Just thank y'all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.